Next, suppose that we keep bending that indifference curve all the way to its extreme, the extreme of perfect complements. And suppose it's still the case that my brother and I are indifferent between choosing taxis or rental cars on the Cayman Islands. That means that when my brother optimizes on the magenta budget constraint, he ends up on the same indifference curve as I do when I optimize on the blue budget constraint. But if the indifference curve is that of perfect complements, that must mean that we are both optimizing at the same point, and there is only a single point that lies both on the magenta and the blue line, the point of intersection. Thus, if we bend that indifference curve all the way to perfect complements, it must be that we get a picture like this. In this picture, points A and B have now become the same point. They've become the same point because we've removed all substitutability that was previously built into the indifference curve. As we bent that indifference curve from the initial panel A to panel B and now to panel C, A and B got closer and closer to one another until they've merged to become the same point. And since the substitution effect is the difference between points A and B, when those become the same point, the substitution effect disappears. In Chapter 5, we found two major ways of distinguishing between tastes. The first simply looked at the shapes of individual indifference curves. The second looked at how individual indifference curves within a map of indifference curves relate to one another. Since substitution effects occur along a single indifference curve, it doesn't matter how the indifference curves are relating to one another within the map. The only thing that really matters is the shape of the indifference curve. The more substitutability is built into the indifference curve, the larger will be the substitution effect, but its direction is always the same. For income effects, on the other hand, we're jumping between indifference curves within a single indifference map. Therefore, what matters is how indifference curves relate to one another. This will tell us whether we consume more or less of a good as income goes up. And the degree of substitutability that builds the shape of an individual indifference curve doesn't really matter. Thus, the shapes matter for substitution effects. The way indifference curves relate to one another matters for income effects.